So how many people already drive? Good, a good number. How many people want to learn how to drive? Good. How many people want to learn how to do it right? Okay, that's what we're going to talk about today, is doing it right. Okay, I'm very, very safety conscious. And so I want to teach everybody to do it right so that you don't end up with having all the accidents that I have probably done. I've probably made every mistake that there is to make with driving, lived through it. Please take it from me, don't repeat the mistakes that I've made. To start my talk, I would like to give you a brief history of how man domesticated the draft animal, how harnesses developed, and how vehicles developed. So if you'll please indulge me, I'm going to read my notes because there's no way I can remember all of this. And then we'll get to the really good stuff and start harnessing and hitching and everything, okay? So thank you. So domestication of livestock started with goats, sheep, and cattle around 6,000 BCE, all right? And then evidence shows us that the domestication of equids, which was the wild horses and the wild asses, started about 4,500 to 4,000 BCE. And it was in the area of the North Sea and the steppes of Russia. Man-horse interaction started in the Neolithic ages, and the mid-Neolithic was the start of true domestication of the wild animals. The donkey is slower than the horse, and throughout history the donkey has been a pack animal. But most importantly, the donkey's role in history is that it was the sire of the mule, and the mule was very, very important to all of history and transportation. The Sumerians were the first ones to start breeding, crossbreeding horses and donkeys around 4000 BCE. By about 2000 BCE, the horse was replacing the ox as the main transportation animal. Asses have evolved over the last 2,000 years. They have evolved by natural selection, controlled breeding, and adapted to their environmental conditions. The first domesticated donkeys were found in Egypt and Western Asia around 3000 to 2500 BCE, where they have always been beasts of burden. By about 1000 BCE, the donkey was the primary beast of burden, and at this time the horse was widely distributed through Europe and the rest of Asia.
Why do you think that it was the donkey and not the horse that was first used for a beast of burden?
Well, because you could catch them easier. Donkeys didn't run as fast as horses ran. So the donkey, because of its very jarring gait and because it is slow, was not a suitable animal for hunting and warfare. So it became the beast of burden. Donkeys started to be used in China around 300 BCE. The Romans brought the donkey to the British Isles as pack animals when they came to Britain and took over Britain. Ireland got the donkey in the 1700s because all the horses were off in fighting wars. So the horses weren't available, so they started to use the donkey. So now we're going to get into vehicles. So the first means of transportation to haul your stuff around was a sledge, okay? And that's just a drag with some rails on it, bent tree branches or whatever, and you put a platform on it and you just dragged everything. But that had a lot of resistance on the ground, and you wore your animal out, or you wore your people out who were pulling the sledges. The sledge was first found in prehistoric Europe and around the Mesopotamian area. And vehicles evolved through a purpose-driven need and utilitarian need. So the development of wheels was when drag and resistance is decreased, your horsepower becomes more efficient. So wheels evolved to reduce draft and friction. And the evidence of first wheels was found out around the steppes of Russia. Words and art depicting carts and wagons first appeared around 3500 BCE, and they were found in the Proto-Indo-European languages, and mostly in the areas of Hungary and the Volga. So we're still back on the steppes of Russia. So sledges evolved into two-wheeled and then four-wheeled vehicles. The first four-wheeled vehicles, and we'll see our four-wheeled vehicle over here and how it developed, did not have a movable front axle. So when the animals pulled these things, it met with a lot of resistance when you went around corners. It was great going straight, but it didn't corner very well. So the evidence for the first movable front axle appears during the Iron Age. Wheels made things much more portable, and evidence shows that wheels had spread throughout the steppes, the breadbasket, and into Europe by 3000 BCE. So because we had wheels, now we had faster modes of transportation. So now we had the spread of languages, and most importantly, we had the spread of technology. The Sumerians were the first ones to primarily use two-wheeled vehicles, and these developed into being chariots. And chariots were around for about 2,000 years. That's a pretty long time for a two-wheeled vehicle to be around. But they were the best thing.
Pulled them themselves, they would have developed four-wheel vehicles much faster.
Yes, four wheels are much more efficient than two wheels. The spoked wheel, and we'll see all of our vehicles here all have spoked wheels. The spoked wheel was invented for the chariot, specifically because it made a light, fast, durable wheel. Chariots were pulled by either 2 or 4 animals hooked abreast. And the first evidence of shafts, because let me take a step back. Chariots were pulled by the horses or the animals or the asses, and they were hitched together. But how did they actually pull the vehicle? Well, they pulled the vehicle off of what's called a dorsal hitch, which was the pole came out, and I'll show you what the pole on the carriage is, but the pole came out, and instead of attaching to traces, it attached to the saddle on the horse's back, and then the neck strap was attached to the saddle, and that's how they pulled it. But if you didn't have 2 or 4 animals and you only had a two-wheeled vehicle and you just needed to do something light, what did you do? Well, you have to have shafts because a single animal can't pull off of a pole. You have to support the shafts. So shafts appeared in China around 200 BCE. And the first public carriages to be used were in the 1560s in England. So here we get from pulling sledges up to the first public omnibuses in the 1500s. Now, to pull all these vehicles, we had to have harness. And as our harness maker was talking earlier, harness really hasn't changed a whole lot. It's gotten a little bit more efficient, but really in 3,000, 5,000 years now, the basic physics are the same. It's just that we've tried to make it more comfortable for our animals, because the more comfortable we can make it for our animals, the more efficient they will be, and they will give us more horsepower and more traction and a better efficiency to do the job. So our first harnesses, as I said, we had dorsal hitch harnesses, and if you think of an oxen cart, they had the neck yokes, right? And you had the pole in between, and the oxen pulled it off of the neck yoke. Well, equids don't do that because they're not built the same way. But a dorsal hitch is actually a very efficient hitch for pulling with a pole. So then they went to breast or neck strap harness, except that it was very choking to a horse. So instead of being higher up on the neck, they started lowering the point of attachment until we get actually to the modern breast collar. And I'll show you on the animals. The biggest advances in efficiency of pulling was the invention of the full neck collar that we were talking about earlier. And the invention of the neck collar didn't come around until the early Middle Ages. And it made pulling power much more efficient. And And the animal, you were able to distribute the weight better. The animal could pull greater amounts of weight. He could pull the plow. He was more efficient than using serfs to do the work. And because the neck collar improved farming, you had better yields. Now you had more surplus. More surplus meant more money. You could trade goods now. And so basically we can say that the Industrial Revolution a few hundred years later came about because of the invention and development of the full neck collar versus the breast collar. And so these are how our harnesses developed from the very earliest prehistoric uses to the modern harness that we have today. But really, our harnesses have not changed a whole lot since the 1700s, since the early 1700s. They still work about the same.